Welcome back to The Laws That Matter. I'm Carissa Kranz, and today we have a great episode with you and for you, the Reverend Sarah Bowen, animal chaplain, award-winning author, and ordained interfaith minister. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Delighted to be here, Carissa.
So I just want to get right to it. You're a reverend. What religion are you?
That's the $1 million question, and I don't have an easy answer. So I identify as a spiritual rebel. You'll see that's the title of the last book.
Yeah, I ask you about that.
And well, what happened? I was raised Christian. My father was a minister, and I was socialized into a particular branch of that. And then I went through this journey, as many of us do, of what works for me, what doesn't. I threw a bunch of stuff out. I reclaimed some of it, and I found myself kind of through a series of weird synchronistic things that happened in an interfaith seminary. And in the process of going through that and discovering the world's religions, I ended up becoming a Judeo-Christian Vedantic Buddhist meditator who studies Wicca and wants to be a Jedi.
Did you make that up?
Well, I guess so. But it's the best way to describe, all of the different influences that come in, right? And we don't have a name for that. We really don't. So I started using spiritual rebel, but we do have a concept for that, and it's called interspirituality. Mm-hmm. So have you ever heard this term before?
I've heard of interspirituality, I've heard of interfaith, and I've heard of New Age spirituality. So maybe you should clarify the difference, because I think many of us, like myself, are born in one religion, but might have gone rogue in a way, or a rebel, and feel like they identify more with just spirituality in general. Like I know I do. I feel like I identify more with the laws of karma and compassion than I necessarily do in an organized religious infrastructure.
This is my favorite topic, so I'm glad we went there. I often like to say, we've put a lot of stuff onto the word organized religion too. And I always like to say, wait, our meditation centers and our yoga studios are organized too. Mm-hmm. So I think what we really mean when we say I don't like organized religion is I don't like the exclusivity that I've felt from an organization. And so I think it's important to kind of put a pin in that.
You're so right. Idea. I don't want to interrupt your thought, but you're so right, because we all need organization and structure within our lives.
We do, but we use it. Exactly. So we use that kind of as I don't like this. And I think what we mean is I don't like people telling me what to do. I don't like values that conflict with mine. I don't like an organization that kicked me out because of my sexuality or my gender or the fact that I was vegan or whatever that was. And so we kind of go into this, I don't like such and such. But what's really interesting is all of the stuff that we pull out that we call spiritual has its roots in religions, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to kind of, I think, embrace what we're for a little more than what we're against. And I think that's really helpful.
I think that with religion, sometimes we feel like what doesn't resonate with us is when we feel like we're told that one religion is superior to the other religion. And then that's where we get into these religious wars in the world, because we feel, like you said, like we don't belong somewhere because we're not part of that religion. And even though both religions are founded on love thy neighbor, compassion, kindness, they get so stuck in what works for them that they feel like that's the only way. And then they start putting down those that don't practice that religion. And then that's when people feel excluded, and religion can cause a problem when it's really based on the same spiritual concepts. And I think you're so right. We all need organization.
So let's dig into that. So interspirituality is a concept coined by Wayne Teasdale, but it goes back further. But what it says is underneath all the religions, and the philosophies, right? Because Buddhism isn't traditionally a religion; it's a philosophical. All the sacred wisdom traditions, everything, that we're looking for three things, right? We're looking for peace. We're looking to be of compassionate service, and we're looking to figure out how to love all of creation or the cosmos. Now that's in every religion. It's in all of them. It's in all of the philosophies. Then as people, we start doing what we do to each other, and then we muck it all up, right?
Mhm.
So the inner spiritual perspective isn't a religion. It's a perspective that says, underneath all these traditions, I see these things, and I can take from those what's useful to me. So like you said, the law of karma is useful to me, or meditation is useful to me, or love thy neighbor is useful to me. And then you're embracing that within your life so that you can work towards peace, service, and love for creation. Does
Mhm.
that ring at all?
Yeah, of course that rings. And I have a feeling it will ring for many of the viewers here. How do you speak to people who are not necessarily on the vegan path, but on the interfaith, inner spirituality, yoga, meditation path?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because a lot of people who are who will use the term spiritual but not religious are actually kind of deeply entrenched in many spiritual paths. We see the yoga life, right? A lot of that happening, or a meditation life, or a bodhisattva vow. When it comes to veganism, for me, vegan is a really, really helpful term when I'm shopping. And thank God for people who are doing accreditation and certifications and things like, that you're working on, and other folks. So I know what I'm buying, right?
Mhm.
Um, the It's not so helpful for me sometimes in communities where people aren't already vegan. That
Mhm.
word can cause some backlash. It can cause some shutdown. It can cause different things. So I actually identify as the word spiritualitarian. So people will say, like, what are you? And just like, what religion are you? As you asked me, Carissa, when we started, when they go, what are you, when we sit down to eat? And I say spiritualitarian, and they give me that, like, what the heck are you talking about look, which I love, because then that starts a conversation.
Mhm.
And how I define spiritualitarian is endeavoring to match my spiritual values with all of my choices, every
Mhm.
single one of them. So from what I'm wearing, to what I'm eating, to what's in my house, to what we do for entertainment, to how the pharmaceuticals I might take were created, right? All of that stuff, all within it. And that kind of starts a conversation with people where they say, well, how do I do that? Right? How do I match these things? My church told me XYZ, or my synagogue told me XYZ. And it goes back to me towards this inner spiritual thing of, we can find vegetarianism and we can find concern for animals in every religion from the beginning. It's how we got kosher. It's how we got halal. It's how we got ahimsa. But it got mucked up by industrialization. It got mucked up by the fact that we no longer live next to the animals, for which are in the systems, right? We don't see them anymore, so we can ignore them, and all of that. So for me, kind of to go back to where you started before I spun out onto all these other ideas,
Mhm.
it's taking people back to the core of the intentions of the spiritual paths they're in.
Mhm.
So if you're a yoga person, let's look at ahimsa. If you like Buddhist meditation, let's look at what the Bodhisattva vow really says about sentient beings.
Mhm.
Christian or Jewish, let's go back and dig into Genesis, because it doesn't say what you might have been told it said. So I
Mhm.
think that if we go back into those sacred texts, I think we can find some of these answers.
Mhm. And I think one thing that you said is really important, is it's really about living a life of spiritual integrity.
Yeah.
That's what when you say spiritualitarian and you're defining to me what that is, it's living a life of spiritual integrity, because a lot of people are on a spiritual path and they don't realize the lack of integrity in their actions and certain things in their life. And that's part of expanding our consciousness, and not part of tuning in is being aware of the flaws within us that are inconsistent and need to be changed. And that's the human condition. Every single one of us has that.
It is. And I think I think that the impact of socialization on us. Okay. So I was raised in a carnistic household.
Hmm.
Okay. My dad was raised on a farm in South Carolina. I
Hmm.
was 20 before I realized that grandpa's cows weren't the same cows as when I was 3. I had no concept of what was
Wow.
happening. I thought that farms had cows, like our house had cats. No clue, right? No clue. And it wasn't talked about. My mother was orphaned by the age of 13, and she grew up in kind of backwoods Louisiana, where they actually sent the kids out to find their food in the woods.
Hmm.
Rabbits, right?
Oh
All
no.
little, yeah, little fuzzy creatures. So my mother's trauma as an adult, when I tell her I don't eat animals, it pulls up for her, am I a bad person because we were starving and they sent me out with a gun, right? So if we were not raised in a house where it was on people's radar, to go against the programming or the socialization that we received is hard. It raises a lot of questions with your family and with your community. So
Yeah.
I think that supporting each other, going through that sometimes slowly, like I would love if everybody said, okay, fine, we're going to be completely vegan. We're not going to use animals in any way. There we go. Done. Magic wand. Poof. Right. But I don't think it happens that way for most people. I think it happens through experiences, and it happens through having a community that supports you. It's really hard if you don't have a community. Now, research tells us that now too. Research tells us that people's choices around animals and other living beings is less about our beliefs. It's less about our ideologies, and it's more about our social networks and our practices. And that's really interesting. So I can give you a lot of facts about the horrors of what's going on. But if I take you into an interspecies meditation, I'm going to have more impact.
I would love to know what an interspecies meditation is. There was a lot of things you said there that I wanted to follow up on.
And I just kept going. Yeah.
That I want to know, what is that? So yeah,
let's talk about interspecies.
Yeah. Right? What is an interspecies meditation?
Okay. So often when we do meditation in kind of the contemporary way that it's done, it's connect to my inner self, right? Or if you experience God or higher power, or I love to say the Force from Star Wars, right? If you experience that as outside, you may be connecting upward or outward or expanding, or you may be connecting very, very deep within when you're meditating, right? But what if we're connecting to other beings through that meditation? So I lead people, actually on my website, modernreverend.com, there's a 5-minute one on there. But what I do is lead people through meditation with the more than human world. So that's through audio and through video of what if our connection is to all these different beings. And that's everything from the beautiful elephants that are out in the high grass to the little piglets who are grunting on the farm, right? As people start to see those beings and connect to those beings, you can't do the same things to those beings, right? They're no longer analytical. They're no longer kind of out there. They're no longer not connected to me. So I'm a big fan of interspecies, also interspecies practices, meditating with your cats, meditating with dogs. I meditate with a hell of a lot of squirrels. Squirrels are one of my favorites.
How do you meditate with squirrels?
Okay, so I live near a lot of squirrels. And what you need to do when you come upon a squirrel is just stop. Okay. Then you tune in, slow your breath, real still, and the squirrel will do the same thing.
I believe that. I think animals pick up on our energy.
Absolutely. And they know that you're not there to harm them. And they're kind of like, what is that human doing? And so I now am up to a point with the squirrels who live in our yard where we can go 15, 16 minutes.
Just staring at each other?
Just staring at each other. And the connection that you then have when you stare in the eyes of, now cats, you want to be careful about staring in their eyes, right? Because they take that as a challenge. But a lot of animals, you're staring in their eyes. You're like you're saying, Carissa, the energy, the compassion, the connection. We can really impact people that way. And then you get to the conversation about, hey, you know that squirrel you were meditating with? Did you know that millions of them die on the roads every year, more than humans? That 1 million animals a day die on our road from roadkill, from human motorists, 1 million. So now that you've had a connection with that squirrel, would it be worth driving 5 miles an hour less on your speed, right? Would you be willing to slow down 5 miles per hour?
It's about expanding your consciousness into everything you do in life.
That's right. And I think that what happens with the word vegan sometimes for people who don't understand what it means is they think it's only about food, right? And they go in immediately into oh my God, don't take such and such from me. So if we can give connection, I think that helps too. The other thing, so if people are in a church or a synagogue or a mosque, or you're challenged with your spiritual community about how do I get people to listen to me about my compassion about other beings. I also do coaching with folks about that, about how do we get our liturgies to include animals? How do we not bypass and do this whole we love nature thing without talking about who's in nature? Right? That happens a lot. How do we get the leadership of spiritual communities to start having this conversation? Because people listen to the leadership. So that's another piece.
Well, that's why people like you exist, to get the conversations going.
And I have found so many people want to have the conversation. So Unitarian Universalists have an animal ministry nationwide, right? We have folks like,
I was going to say, is your audience mostly vegans or non-vegans?
My audience is mostly non-vegan.
Okay. And
so what I have found is that where my work is most important, I don't need to preach to the choir, so to speak. Right?
Exactly.
I don't need to tell the vegans.
You're a reverend, you get to preach.
Right? But the vegans already know. And I think what happens, Carissa, is a lot of animal activists get fed up with some of the messages they hear in religious or spiritual communities, and they say, I'm out of here. And what I said was, I'm going to stay. I'm going to be noisy. And I'm going to stretch you from inside with a lot of questions. Like, why do we have meat at a potluck? Why are we not default veg? Right? Why? Asking a lot of questions from inside, because I think from inside we can change systems and structures.
Yeah, but you have to speak to people who are open to the conversation. I have met so many people who are on a spiritual path of yoga, or even following a meditation teacher, and they have not extended it to their diet in any way. There's a complete disconnect. And some of them are open to the conversation, but then when they find that their spiritual teacher is not vegan, then it's an excuse to them, this happened to me recently, to justify why they don't need to be as well, and kind of put down, like they couldn't win the conversation because there's no way to justify the decisions logically of the violence that they're supporting by eating and buying cruelty, animal exploited products.
Yeah.
But they were not open to the conversation because their leaders have somehow found a way to close the door on the topic.
But you know what happens?
That door. Yeah.
You know what happens, Carissa, is those leaders hear the question and it sticks with them. And like a bad meal, I guess, kind of returns on you. I have had a number of people in spiritual leadership where I've asked questions and they give me a reason. I had someone who said to me, well, a carrot could feel pain too. And I'm like, oh, come on, let's not go there. Right.
I know.
But so I had this conversation and I was, asked a lot of really important questions. And this is the most important one, I think, is how do you reconcile our belief in love and compassion with what is happening to these animals? And if you keep asking the question, what I have found is somewhere down the line, that spiritual leader changes their beliefs. When enough people ask them the question, and because we have to remember, they've been socialized too, right? We have so many systems that are socializing us to ridiculous beliefs that are normalized and said are natural, right? We know this. Anyone who's explored this at great detail. I'm preaching the choir again, but some people, they don't know that, and so we have to question. I think the spiritual path. I think spirituality is about asking a lot of questions.
And how long ago did you transition to a vegan lifestyle?
It's a good question. It took me so long, Carissa. I am so jealous of people who were born vegan. But
even though I was born vegan in terms of food and diet, it was an evolution, like you said, with all products or shoes and purses and, leather seats in cars and couches. I mean, that comes with an evolution and an awakening so you never stop growing and learning on this.
So that's a great point. So you just busted one of my misconceptions and biases that it's easy for people born vegan. So there you go. We just reframed me on that. It's a journey for all of us, clearly. And for me, so, I was the kid who, I had a preacher dad who took me to a lot of funeral homes and stuff. I'm really into rodents. Okay. I'll admit it. You heard me talk about squirrels, chipmunks, marmots, lemurs, like bring it. I love little furry wild guys. And so I used to find little chipmunks on the side of the road when I was going home, and they were dead. And I would pick them up and put them in my lunchbox and bring them home to bury them because I knew my dad buried, dead people. So I would bring them home. I would dig little holes in my mom's rose bushes, right? And I would stick them in. She says I used to dig them up a lot to see what was going on. I was very curious about the process of what death meant. So from a very small age, I was concerned, and I didn't like to eat meat. I didn't like to eat animals. And Thanksgiving was horrid, right? I would say, could you put it in another room? Could you turn it around so I can't see it? But I didn't have words yet, Chris. I didn't have words yet for what that meant. I didn't understand vegetarian, vegan. They weren't options that were given to me. I didn't know how to do that. I had no social media. I had no internet to go look this stuff up. Like, there were a couple hippies down the street who were vegetarians, right? That's all I knew. I didn't know it was available to me. So it really took me going into 12-step recovery. I'm a 12-stepper. I used to really, really love wine, like a lot. And that got in the way of my life, right? So I got into 12-step, and in 12-step, they started asking a lot of questions about, what in your life do you want to change? What are you doing that isn't working for you? That's the basis of 12-step spirituality, is what are you doing? What are you doing over and over? And it's not changing. And so food and animals and clothing. Oh, I was a motorcycle rider. The amount of leather that I had, even though I loved critters, I didn't connect those things, right? So it has been.
Many of us don't. And that's right. No, we don't. Okay, so a friend of mine is actually Marianne Williamson, and when we had a conversation, I don't want to talk about the vegan thing with on her, but we've had other conversations about things and evolutions of awakenings, and she had said to me once, which I thought was powerful. It doesn't mean we always apply it properly and consistently within our life, but she said, "Once you know, you cannot know."
Yeah.
So, and that's for anything, whether it's a bad relationship you're in and you're trying to turn a blind eye, or, someone betrayed you, which is also a relationship, whatever it is. Once you know, even if you didn't want to know and you think you might have been better off never knowing, once you know, you cannot not know. You have a responsibility to deal with that new knowingness.
And I would add something to that as well. Because I think sometimes the once you know is part of what keeps people from wanting to have conversations with me or you or other people, because, oh my God, they're going to tell me. I know something's there. I don't want to hear it. I like to say, once you remember, there's no unremembering. I think we already know. I think we know as little children. I was that kid with the entire bed full of stuffed animals that I spoke to, who had lives and feelings, right?
Well, I do, by the way.
I still do. I still have
invisible friends as well.
That's right. Right. So we are born compassionate, loving, caring. We don't know we're separate from our mothers for months. We don't even know our feet are ours for months, right? We are born into oneness. We are born into non-duality, to use a spiritual term. We are taught that we are separate.
Yeah.
And we are taught that others are separate. And then we are taught to classify them as love them, eat them, wear them, right? So I think
I don't even know, like, it took me a long time to make the connection that a down pillow is something cruel. We've been trained to think, oh, luxury down pillow, down comforter, that's luxurious. We're so not trained. And yes, like I was born vegan in terms of the food on my plate. It was much later in life that I started thinking about, that down pillow or that pillow from Z Gallery that looks really good, that would look great on my couch, not thinking about what it was filled with. That was an evolution. And it wasn't something I knew. I don't even know what made me wake up, to be honest, except for maybe it might have been the vegan certification business that I started, BeVeg, that I started realizing this goes so far beyond food and wine. And then I started learning about fashion and furniture and textiles and the cruelty across the board, that then I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm done. I now know stuff that before was not on my radar.
I think we have to have curiosity. I think that needs to be like the number one trait that we cultivate in ourselves as spiritual folks, is curiosity. Sometimes religion is criticized for being about, solid answers, right? And that you have to have firm beliefs and solid answers and strong faith and all this kind of stuff. But a lot of great theologians will tell us that's not the case. Paul Tillich said that doubt is not the opposite of faith. It's an essential element of faith, right? So we've got to have curiosity about, how was this thing made? Or, I didn't know that either. It took a long time for me to understand. Oh, I'm going to do one of those big confessions right here on live Facebook to Carissa. But,
I was play on Roku too, by the way.
There we go. Here's my big live confession, so that if you're sitting here thinking I'm
only
holding
a reverend would give confessions,
right?
I go to church and give the confession. Let's hear it.
Exactly. And I didn't grow up Catholic, so it's weird that I use that word, but I had each animal kind of came off my view one by one. I had an experience with a water buffalo in Nepal, and then I couldn't eat red meat. And then I came home and I had this organic turkey and I was putting it in the oven, and I was like, never again, not doing it. And so, and then I saw like a pig at a pig roast, and I was like, nope. Bacon stayed a long time for me until I saw that pig. So an animal actually did it for me for each one of these things. But I had a really big blind spot about dairy.
A lot, that's normal.
Right. And I was at a retreat, and my rationalization for this still floors me. But here's how it went. I was talking to a woman who said, how do you eat? What do you eat? And I said, oh, I'm vegetarian. And she said, what about dairy? And here was my answer. I'm okay with animals having jobs. I have to have a job I don't like either. Now, I had all this compassion for all these animals, right? And I was aware of what was happening in the meat industry. And yet I somehow thought cows and chickens had jobs to go and create milk and eggs. Like that was their job. They commuted and they went. Somehow that there was just this weird blind spot. And this woman was so...
You grew up on a farm, so you felt like the animals might be taken care of.
You know what? Maybe it was, because I did see my grandfather love his animals, right?
Yeah, you might have disconnected from the commercialization of the factory farming that went on.
It might be. And so she was so gentle, this woman, with me, and she just looked at me and she asked me one question. And she said, what about the babies? And my answer was, oh, they don't put the babies to work. And she said, no, what about the babies? Mom cows only have milk when they have babies. And all of a sudden, I remember this as gears moving in my head. I remember almost hearing a ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk. Oh my God. Right? Oh my. And that's what you talk about, what we were talking about, awakening. There was another awakening and another awakening, and an awakening about down, and an awakening about leather, and an awakening about hormones they want to give those of us who are perimenopausal, right? Let's talk about that. Or eyelashes. Why are we taking eyelashes off of minks, right? All these different things that you never even think about. Yeah. So I think we awaken, Carissa, slowly. And I think that my belief is that if we awaken to all of this at the same time, our heads would explode. We would not be able to handle it. We wouldn't. We would become so mentally unstable. And so I think we awaken in a way that we can.
Mhm.
Does that make any sense?
No, to me, it definitely makes a lot of sense. I think it's a process, and consciousness never stops expanding. And people are put in front of us oftentimes for a reason. And if you are paying attention, you may capture the lesson, right? So
Yeah, I think that goes to
captured it.
community.
I mean, I have, yes, I was born vegan, and I've never eaten meat. But when I went to college, my mom was no longer cooking and everyone was eating pizza and dairy. I never drank milk, but I got a little sloppy with the dairy for a little period of time there. And I thought it wasn't cruel too. I wasn't educated on the rape rack and the other horrific crimes on animals that happen with veal, the baby cow being stolen from the mom. And I don't know, I was just tuned out of it. I was like, well, they give milk, and it didn't register until someone else said something to me. And I mean, I wasn't on the dairy thing very long. It might've been like 6 months, but and I was never something I craved. It was hard to be at college without, my mom cooking anymore. And I was like, all right, well, maybe I'll try this pizza tonight. Although I usually took the cheese off anyway, but I was just, I was a little less strict about it, even though I didn't even want the cheese. But I became super strict about it when the moral and ethical side of it clicked in my head, because for me, I'm a vegan. I'm an ethical vegan, right? It's a moral choice. I was born and raised vegan by my mom because she thought it was healthier. But I stayed vegan because I wanted nothing to do with harming an animal. So for me to be vegan, and I made that choice at about 5 years old, because when my parents divorced, I went back and forth. So I had choices to make about the food on my plate. And I made very clear, I remember the ethical decision at that age that I loved animals and I wasn't going to eat them. But it's an ever expansive process unless you're born into an ethical vegan environment where they're training you on the ethics of it from the beginning. But even then, that's not necessarily your decision. And there are people who are raised that way who then will go completely the other way because it was never their decision. I almost feel like as a society, and I have friends like that who grew up Hindu, for example, and vegetarian. And then as soon as I got out of the house, and they had the best Indian cooking in the world, their mom was the best cook. As soon as I got out of the house, they were done with the diet. Done. They felt like it was never their choice. They wanted to do it their way. So sometimes I think we have it backwards. I think we should raise people in a household that gives them the option, where they learn the option of compassion first, though. Right now, we're raising people in a household of meat and dairy with cultural overlays that has made that normal. And then it's a harder decision later in life to try to convert people and recondition people mentally to leave that behind. But I think, what if we started raising our kids in an environment that taught compassion and kindness on your plate from the beginning, and then you gave them the choice? I think most people would stay if they felt they had the choice and were taught the ethics of it from the beginning. They didn't have to find out later in life because the right person somehow appeared in front of them and, made their brain click together like yours with the dairy. I just wish there was a way to get us on that path and on that track.
I think that spirituality is a piece of that. So I think if we look back at what was the original intention of religions, right? For many, many indigenous cultures, there was not a word called religion. The word religion came around when people started studying other cultures. Okay. People didn't have a religion that was separate from their lives. It was all together, right? So that's where we get that kind of spiritual thing. But if we look back at when religion started, when spiritual paths and philosophies and all this, there are a couple things that they meant to do, right? How do we as a community live together? That's one thing, right? How do we treat each other? And the other is, what do we believe about suffering and about the purpose of life? What is the meaning? Those are the two things that underscore that, right? How do we get along as a group? And why are we here? What do we do when shitty stuff happens? Yes, the minister just said shitty stuff happens. What do we do about that, right? So if we're raising our children to understand not only the ethical laws or rules or code or the why, but to start them on meditation, start them on loving kindness practices, have them meditate with squirrels, have them spend time in nature. And most importantly, a lot of work that I do in the content of my next book is actually on animal loss. And what do we do when a pet dies in a family or an animal companion? How do we treat that with children? And my research shows that a lot of people, that animal is just swept away and it's not talked about again, right? But what if we were able to have our children involved in rituals around animal loss, whether your house is interspecies or not, or whether a bird hits a window outside and dies? How do we teach our children to revere that life or what to do? How do we bake that compassion into everything we do so it's a way of living, not just a code of ethics? And I think that's where spirituality can come in. And so it comes back to practice, spiritual practice, and really baking that in with children when they're very small, so they understand what it feels like to be connected to that little bird or to that squirrel or that chipmunk they just stuck in their lunchbox and left as a surprise for their mom in the kitchen.
I love that. So you've brought up your book. So tell us about your book. I know you have a new one coming out as well, so we'll talk about
I do. Yeah. So Spiritual Rebel came out last year, and it's a book of 21 days of different spiritual practices to try. So it is targeted to folks who are spiritual but not religious, or people who are in a spiritual community, but what they're interested in has gotten a little wider than perhaps their community offers, right? So if you're that person who's like, I go to church on Sunday, but I love kirtan and I want to meditate and and I'm interested in what the Wiccans do and, all that kind of stuff. So it pulls from all sorts of different places to give people different practices to try. It's quite irreverent. There's a couple F words in there.
You know what though? It's all about what people relate to. So if people will relate to you, you won. Okay. So do you discuss veganism in the book at all, or do you stick to more spiritual interfaith and the connection of humans to animals?
So there are animal practices throughout, and talk about compassion and loving kindness throughout. And then towards the end, once people have been doing spiritual practice and kind of have a basis or a foundation, I have a chapter called May the Fork Be With You. As I mentioned, I have a Star Wars problem. So that entire chapter is about doing an inventory of your life. What you wear, what you eat, how much water do you use? Right? Yeah, it is. Integrity. And what it is that curiosity and that questioning again of, I say to people, go into your closet. Do you know what your clothes are made of?
So I have a question on that.
Yeah.
My evolution came a little later with everything. Started with the food, but fashion and stuff. Okay, so I won't buy it anymore. I haven't bought it in years, but I still have it in my closet, and I don't know what to do with it. What am I supposed to do with it? I don't know what to do. I won't wear it. You won't catch me wearing it, and throwing it away seems wasteful. I don't know what to do with it.
It's a great question. A really, really good question. And when I was in seminary, they tasked us with writing our own ethical code. Right? Write your own ethical code. And this came up for me because I still had a leather belt, and I have a pair of really awesome steel toe black combat boots from the 1980s that I've had since I was 13. And I'm quite attached to them. And I thought, what do I do with these? And the same thing, I don't wear them in public, but they're in the bottom of the closet. What do I do? So where I netted out is I took that question into meditation. I said, what do I do about this? And where I ended up with was, it's wasteful. If it's wasteful for me to throw something out, then it's not reverent to that animal's life.
Right.
So I will use it until it's destroyed, or it's broken, or it's worn out. And then I will always replace it with something that's cruelty free. And that's where I came out.
Yeah. Okay. So let me tell you where this is why my thing. So I don't want to wear it.
Yeah, I don't wear it either. It's in the
So
but
what
at
do you
first
do?
I did. But at first I did. So it was like a 2-step process. It was, I don't want to be wasteful. Then I was like, do I gift it? I'm like, I
Right.
don't want to gift it.
Well,
Do
because
I?
the problem with gifting it and wearing it, in my opinion, is okay, if I wear it, I feel like I'm modeling it. And then
Yeah.
I'm like making it look good. So other people might want to go buy it or something. Because if you wear something, you're sporting it around. And I kind of have a problem with that. If you gift it, then a gift is supposed to be something like joyful that you're giving someone that they want to be, that they should want to wear around. And why should anyone want to wear it around? I just feel like everything's just in my closet. Like you said, I don't want to waste it. I don't want to throw it out. I don't want to gift it. I don't want to give it to Goodwill because then someone else is making money off of cruelty. Even though it's not new cruelty and renewed cruelty, it's still supporting an industry of consumerism that supports cruelty.
So I don't think there's an answer,
So it's
Carissa.
taking up space.
Yeah, I don't think there's an answer. And I think what it is it's a reminder. So that steel toe pair of boots in my closet is a reminder of my commitment to not wearing it, not doing it. And it sits there. And I don't think there's an answer of what to do with that. I really think it's a quandary.
Here, actually, Tony, helps with our social media. He said, how about donating it or selling it and using the money to give to an animal sanctuary? I actually think that's a good idea.
I think it's a good idea. I think that we need to be careful about where we donate.
Yeah.
So as Carissa was saying, some of the places that we donate, then there's problems in some of the places where we donate things. So I think if we find a place to donate it, yeah, I think that's great. I really think that people need to search inside and figure out, where do I net out on what feels right to me to do? And if that feels for someone like that feels reverent, that feels like it's in integrity with my values, then do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I also, wonder about some of, I love like vegan leather. And on the other hand, when I wear it, I feel like somebody needs to create labels that I can stick on all my clothes that say, yes, this is vegan.
We need the BeVeg symbol.
Seriously, like if I could have those like on a pin,
on the
Carissa,
outside,
and I could just stick it on my back pocket that said, right, I could put it on my clothes, or I could put it on my shoes, and I would just have like the V, the little symbol, right? Because sometimes when I wear things, I wonder what message that's sending. I feel like I want to walk around saying that it's not what it looks like, right? So that's a quandary too. So I think this is messy. I think
it's such a quandary because we want to have the substitutes that carry off the authentic, real skin of an animal, which, if you think about it, is so sad and disgusting. But we've commercialized and consumerism so much the fashion and luxury side of it, that now, in order for it to not be a sacrifice to the consumer, we need to come up with these alternatives that are not a sacrifice, but it looks the exact same. But then we want to display our ethics when we're wearing something that looks the exact same and make it cool with, like, I like that, like a little BeVeg vegan button or something. And we should look into that. We should
look into that, because I actually tried to do that myself. I bought like a little pin, that had like a green, it wasn't a BeVeg, but it was something, right? And I bought it and I stuck it on one of my shoes. But then of course it fell off, right? And it poked me and whatever. But I would totally do that, because then it would also start a question with people about, hey, what's that symbol mean? Because I really think what we need to do is be in conversation with people.
Well, we need to, well, that's one thing I feel like why vegan labeling and vegan certification is so important. Not only does it keep the supply chain accountable, which means something is truly cruelty-free and ethical, not just because they think it's vegan because they are buying products that are labeled vegan, because the reality is, if something's labeled vegan, if it's not certified vegan, you don't know if it's vegan. The laws do not protect the vegan word. They don't even recognize it. And manufacturing facilities can use the vegan claim very loosely. But the reality is any claim, even if it's used loosely, and honestly could be fraudulent and misleading and deceptive, which is totally against the Consumer Protection Act. But the Consumer Protection Act doesn't protect us vegans right now. So you do want the vegan certified symbol. But just with that being said, any vegan labeling and vegan mark raises consciousness and awareness, because once we start seeing things, we start looking for it. And then it's like anything in life, like you never notice something before. And then when you notice it once, you start seeing it everywhere. And it's like, oh my God, it's now in my consciousness. So I think that's the benefit of like having a vegan label or a vegan pin or a vegan claim, because once you start seeing that on grocery store shelves or on fashion items, then the consumer starts looking for it because they're now aware and it's on their radar.
And I think also, I often say to people, you don't need to identify as vegan to use vegan products.
Right.
It's so odd. Like my mother will say to me, well, I don't, I gave her some dark vegan chocolate, right? I sent it over. And my mother and I mean, this is such the quandary, I don't understand what you eat. I'm like, I don't eat anything that has a face. But I sent some chocolate and she said, well, I don't like vegan chocolate. And I said, well, you like dark chocolate. Oh, I like dark chocolate, but I don't like vegan chocolate. And, so we got into this conversation of, is that word useful for some people? Is it not? Do you have to be vegan to eat vegan food? All of this. And I think that
we need to redefine though for okay, born vegan here, right? I grew up when it was totally taboo and totally odd and a huge sacrifice. It is changing. It is starting to be cool and hip. Plant-based is more, I think, the hip word, but the problem is if you're truly against cruelty and you care about animals, you can't use a plant-based term, because plant-based does not mean vegan. It does not mean it's cruelty-free, and it does not mean it's without animal exploitation or animal parts. Only vegan can mean that, because vegan means, the absence of. Plant-based means it is based in plant products. It is totally a loose term that doesn't protect the consumer, but it is a popular term. Our goal at BeVeg, for example, is to rebrand veganism to be cool, to be luxury, to be veg, right? That's what it's about, to be veg and to carry it off like this is the clean lifestyle, this is the honest lifestyle, this is the transparent lifestyle. This means vegan food safety, no cross-contamination. And whether you're vegan or not, you should know and care where your products came from in the manufacturing facility, because the reality is there are millions of products out there, but there are not millions of manufacturing facilities. They're co-packing facilities. So a lot of these products that you think are vegan are being made on the exact same production line and assembly line of all those animal origin products. So it is so important to have a certified vegan mark where you know that vegan safety and integrity is assessed and audited, and that there are procedures and training in place to train the facilities how to run a vegan production line without compromising vegan integrity, whether that's running the vegan production line in the morning and then triple washing the equipment, keeping the utensils separate, having washroom procedures, packaging room procedures. Right now, manufacturing facilities don't take vegan seriously. They just want the marketing benefit and the sales benefit of a vegan claim. And I know this, but they take kosher seriously. They take gluten seriously, but there is zero seriousness when it comes to vegan.
Well, now that
all of us caring about it.
And that's an interesting point to tie it to the spiritual conversation, right? Taking kosher seriously, taking halal seriously, now, why are we taking these serious, right? That's because groups of people have identified that that's important.
And the Constitution, though, protects religion under the Equal Protection Clause in the Civil Rights Act. So,
but I guess my point, so which is a little different than where you're going, right? Is that your area of expertise? But where I'm trying to steer off to also is those of you who are in a spiritual community who are listening right now, right? You have power within groups of people who make choices. So for example, I was at a spiritual conference about 2 years ago that had about 600 people, right? And they decided we're going vegan for the conference. And then putting signs up in the conference, right, that said, we have gone vegan for this conference for this reason, which were elevated the awareness and a bunch of other people. And it may have had problems. And within the hotel catering facility, was it perfect? Probably not, right? Absolutely. Everything that Carissa is talking about is an important problem. And I'm so glad that she and other people are working on it.
Mhm.
But if we also want to steer people to even know that they should be concerned about what Carissa's talking about, we need to even get it on their radar. And I think the problem within spiritual communities is it's not on the radar. But when we can go back and say, why was there kosher food? Why was there halal? Why in scripture are there rules about not killing a cow in front of its calf? Why are there these things? And do we as a spiritual community need to change what we're doing? And then hopefully, Carissa, you and the folks who really understand the details of it will help the legality of this too.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to, is the legality, because even though kosher and halal have had kosher law, Jewish law, Judaic law, there's biblical law, right? But it took a long time before it was penned into legislative law. Like in New York, it was the 2004 Kosher Act that actually mandated how kosher labeling was going to be used on products.
And we still have problems in kosher because kosher isn't cruelty free. Right?
No, kosher is not cruelty free.
Right. But I think the concept of spiritual communities do have power when we group together. And I think some of the work like that Creature Kind is doing has been very interesting to me on that respect.
I also want the people watching to know that, because I did say the difference is kosher and, halal are religious based, but I don't want that to deter people, because there is a separation of church and state in our Constitution, and it is not for our Constitution to decide what religion is constituted as. And the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, has defined religion to mean a strongly held belief system. So I believe that veganism is a strongly held belief system and a movement with 78 million people and followers. And it is about time that it is penned into the Constitution, where we have the same protection under the law, the Equal Protection Clause, as that of any other religion when it comes to our choice of living a life of compassion. I think that the Constitution needs to protect us.
I love that.
It's not just we are not just a trend or a group of people. We are a lifestyle that we are practicing religiously, and it is not up for the government to decide what constitutes religion and what doesn't. So we should have the same rights under the law. We don't have them yet, but I do believe, I hope in my lifetime, we can make that happen. I'd like to be part of that.
Yeah, and I think that whenever you're talking about a new social movement too, that you don't have the same type of protection, or you don't even have the same type of I don't know. I want to say seriousness, right? Sometimes when we explain to someone, here's why I eat this, or here's why I don't wear this, or here's what it is. And just to elevate the idea of ethical veganism or spiritual veganism or whatever kind of veganism we happen to be doing, as it's not about an eating choice.
No.
It really isn't. Now, for some folks who are healthy vegans, I have had them, or health-minded vegans, I have heard them describe their veganism that way.
Then they're plant-based.
Yeah.
They're plant-based eaters and lifestyle. But you can't say, I'm keto, I'm South Beach diet, I'm Atkins, I'm vegan. Because Atkins, South Beach, and keto are not based on a belief system. Veganism is.
And so it's interesting. We've come full circle, right? So we're talking about beliefs. We're talking about values, core values that we hold. We're talking about actions that we make based on that. And so it's clear that, just like anything to me, this has to be this kind of ending animal exploitation, if that's what many of us are interested in, and extending consciousness and compassion has to happen on a number of different fronts. Mm-hmm. So I think for each person, you can see clearly from how passionate Carissa and I are, that we have different areas of this that we've decided, here's where I want to tackle it. Here's the conversation I want to have. Here's the schooling I'm going to get. Here's the conversations I'm going to have. And then we group up together. So I've just learned a bunch from Carissa about legal stuff that I have got to go and find more about and scour all her information. She's learned a little bit about inner spirituality, right? And so I think that we have to find out, and this goes back again for me to the purpose of spirituality or the purpose of religion that we find in all of these traditions is to be of service. To be of service. What is yours to do?
That's the law of divine compensation. When you make your passion and purpose your profession, and you should live of service. And I think that when we are living in service, the truth is not any one of us are capable by ourselves of accomplishing this massive plan. We all have parts. Like our organs have parts within our one human body, and we all make up a part of the bigger picture. So I think it's so important that we are living in service of our part, whatever that part is.
That part can be strange. So, for me, I have this little side business called Sarah B's Roadkill Ministry. And I have signs on my Jeep, and I have a bright yellow vest and my Chaplain sign and a bunch of shovels and those orange lights that go woo, 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 that go on top of my Jeep. And I spend a lot of my day driving around where I live, where there's a lot of little critters who are dead on the road. I pull over. I pull them off the road. I give them a little blessing. I put, some flowers on them. I say, may you have a most auspicious next lifetime, little buddy. I am so sorry about the callousness of humanity and what happened here, but I hope you're okay wherever you are or whatever's going on. And that starts a conversation with people where they say, what are you doing? You are nuts. And I say, this is where I feel called to let people know what's going on. Again, 1 million animals a day. Over 400 million animals a year in the US alone die from human motorists. So that's a piece I want everyone to know. And that ended up, becoming the next book that I'm working on, which is Sacred Send-Offs, that'll be out next year, which is talking about, one piece of this is preventing animal death. The other piece is, what do we do about the animals who die? And what is our moral obligation to them? And just like we were talking about the little bird who hits the window, or the family companion animal who passes, or the millions of animals who've just been gassed for COVID, right? Any of these animals, what do we do about their lives? So I think it's that piece too. How can we be reverent? How can we be aware? How can we not turn our eyes away and say, this doesn't have anything to do with me. Someone else will take care of this. Not to end us on a down note.
No, but I actually think that you are ending on the right road, because I wanted to end with your next book that's coming out, which you're addressing now. So where can people find that book and order it or get it, or how can we know it's out?
So you can head to Modern Reverend, and Reverend is all E's. There's not an A in there. So modernreverend.com. There's a link there to click on to get on the pre-order list for Sacred Send-Offs, which will be out next year. There are also links to, I do mentoring and coaching for folks who are trying to bring their spiritual values in line. If you're one of those folks like Carissa was saying, who went to your spiritual leadership and you got an answer that you didn't really like and you want a little work on educating them, I help people do that too. And I also work with people around grief and loss of companion animals. That's a big thing for a lot of people. They may have a dog or a cat that they're in relationship with, or a horse or a squirrel or whoever it is. And when it passes and you feel grief and loss and anguish, not all spiritual communities will revere that as the same or the same value as a human life. And so I work with people around that too. So people can head to the website and find out a little there, as well as, a little more about animal chaplaincy. We didn't really go into exactly what that is, but what does that mean? What is an animal chaplain, and what do we do with our days? So there's
I would imagine that means that you're kind of an ambassador for the animals. Would that be what an animal chaplain is?
Yeah, what it means in the short version is that I support anyone spiritually, regardless of their belief system or their species. So part of it is advocating for animals. Part of it is helping animal-human bond, and part of it is taking care of them where they need to be taken care of. We have some interesting science now that animals lead spiritual lives.
Mhm.
So if we look at the trans-species definition of spirituality from James Herod, and the
Mhm.
work that was done looking at Jane Goodall's work with chimps and a lot of different animals, if we look at elephants and what they do when they bury each other and all of that, to deny animals spiritual lives is another kind of a harsh reality of what humans do, right? So how do we make sure that we're giving them time? You wouldn't believe how much cats and dogs like to meditate.
Yeah, I think it's all about a vibrational experience
Yeah.
and being able to vibrationally communicate with the animals, vibrationally communicate with nature, raise your vibration with food and what you wear, and being in alignment with all that you believe in mentally and in your heart, and living a life of integrity and alignment with all those things. So you're doing some amazing work. Thank you so much for joining me. And everyone should go to your website. One more time, what was the website to buy the book and to sign up?
Sure, modernreverend.com. And actually the book has a website that has just gone up too called sacredsendoffs.com. So that has the pre-order link if you'd like to get it when it's hot off the presses next year.
Okay, Sarah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And on that note, we'll have our own sacred send off. So namaste.
Namaste.